The skies above Admetus glowed crimson as another Grommark bombardment tore through the planet's thin defensive shield. General Vixer watched from the command center's viewport, his weathered face reflecting the distant explosions that had become all too familiar over the past decade. The once proud metropolises of his homeworld now stood as skeletal monuments to a civilization on the brink of extinction. Status report, Vixer demanded, his voice carrying the weight of 10 years of constant retreat. Lieutenant Zoxer, a young officer whose optimism remained stubbornly intact despite everything they'd lost, approached with a data tablet. Eastern Bunker Networks report heavy casualties, sir. The Grommark breached the outer defenses at 3 points. We've lost contact with Sector 7. Vixer's four-fingered hand tightened around the command rail. Sector 7 housed over 10,000 civilians, families who had survived year after year of this brutal war. Now they were either dead or captured. Neither fate was preferable when dealing with the Grommark. And the Joxar breeding chambers? He asked, dreading the answer. Compromised, sir. We managed to evacuate 60% of the larvae, but the rest. The general closed his eyes briefly. The Joxar, tiny insectoid creatures native only to Admetus, were the heart of this conflict. Their metamorphosis produced a compound that enhanced strength, stamina, and aggression. The Vitrarian had once traded it peacefully across the galaxy. Now, the Grommark wanted exclusive control, and they were willing to exterminate an entire civilization to get it. Commander Sovar, Vixer's strategic advisor and oldest friend, stepped forward. Unlike Zoxer's youthful energy, Sovar carried himself with the grim pragmatism of someone who had calculated their chances of survival and found them wanting. General, Sovar said quietly, we should relocate to Bunker Complex 9. Intelligence suggests the Grommark will target this command center within the next 6 hours. Vixer nodded absently. Another retreat. Another desperate scramble to stay one step ahead of extinction. The Vitrarian forces were spread thin across what little territory they still controlled. Food supplies were dwindling. Weapon systems failed faster than they could be repaired. The Galactic Council, that useless congregation of bureaucrats, had offered nothing but hollow sympathy. Sir, a communications officer called from her station, her voice strangely pitched. We're receiving a transmission on an unauthorized frequency. Vixer frowned. Grommark? No, sir. The officer hesitated. Sir, it appears to be from Earth. The command center fell silent. Earth, home of humanity. The species that had declined to join the Galactic Council, preferring independence to the entanglements of interstellar politics. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as unpredictable, resourceful, and dangerously competent when provoked. They had largely kept to their own system, with only occasional diplomatic exchanges with other species. Earth? Vixer repeated. That's impossible. Why would humans contact us now? They've stayed out of this conflict for a decade. Sovar's expression darkened. It could be a Grommark trick. Negative, the communications officer insisted. The transmission carries authentication codes from the human coalition. They're responding to our distress signal, sir. Vixer exchanged a bewildered glance with Sovar. 3 months ago, in desperation, they had broadcast an emergency plea across all known frequencies, including those used by non-council worlds. They never expected a response, least of all from humanity. Put it through, Vixer ordered. The main view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. The alien features were both familiar and strange. No cranial ridges like the Vitrarian, skin a shade of brown rather than the blue-gray of Vixer's people, but the eyes held an intelligence that transcended species. General Vixer, the human greeted him in perfect galactic standard. I'm Ambassador Bernard of the Human Coalition. We have received your distress signal and wish to discuss the possibility of intervention. A fragile hope, something Vixer had thought long extinguished, flickered in his chest. Yet caution tempered his response. Ambassador, he acknowledged, the Vitrarian appreciate your contact, but I must admit surprise. Humanity has maintained neutrality in galactic affairs. Bernard's expression was unreadable. Neutrality is a luxury, General. Sometimes circumstances demand action. We've been monitoring the Growmark expansion with concern. Their aggression appears insatiable. You understand correctly, Vixer replied. The Growmark will not stop with Admitis. Their addiction to the Joxar compound has made them unstable. Yes, the Joxar. Bernard leaned forward slightly. Perhaps you could explain more about this resource that has cost your people so dearly. Vixer sensed the subtle accusation beneath the request. The Vitrarian had profited greatly from Joxar trade before the war. They had armed the Growmark with the very compound that now fueled their relentless campaign. We will tell you everything, Ambassador, Vixer said. But first, I must know, is humanity truly considering intervention? After 10 years of silence from the Galactic Council, Bernard's face remained impassive. We are considering it. The Council's inaction is precisely why we've maintained our independence. But before any decision is made, we need complete transparency about this conflict, its origins, its potential consequences. For the first time in years, Vixer felt something other than despair. Whether it was hope or merely the postponement of inevitable defeat, he couldn't say. But it was something. We will relocate to a secure facility, Vixer said. I will contact you again in 6 hours with all the information you require. We'll be waiting, Bernard replied, and the transmission ended. The command center erupted with voices, questions, speculations, a surge of energy that had been absent for too long. Silence, Vixer commanded, and the room fell quiet. Prepare evacuation protocols. Priority communications equipment goes first. We must maintain contact with Earth at all costs. As the staff rushed to follow his orders, Sovar approached privately. Do you trust them? He asked in a low voice. Vixer stared at the blank screen, where Ambassador Bernard's face had been moments before. I don't know, but what choice do we have? Outside, the sky continued to burn. The journey to Bunker Complex 9 was harrowing. 3 times they had to divert their convoy to avoid Gromar patrols. Once, they abandoned vehicles and proceeded on foot through the ruins of what had once been Admitis's most prestigious university. Vixer felt a pang as they passed the collapsed dome of the astrophysics building where he had studied in his youth. So much knowledge lost, so much beauty destroyed. By the time they reached the safety of the underground complex, 5 hours had passed. Vixer wasted no time establishing a secure connection with Earth. Ambassador Bernard appeared on screen promptly, creating the strange impression that he had been waiting all along. Behind him was an office with large windows showing a view of blue skies and gleaming towers, so different from the devastation outside Vixer's bunker. General, Bernard acknowledged. I'm glad you reached safety. Thank you for your patience, Ambassador. As promised, I'm prepared to share everything about our conflict with the Growmark. Vixer gestured, and Sovar stepped forward with data files. With your permission, we'll transmit detailed reports on military engagements, civilian casualties, and resource depletion. Bernard nodded. Send them. But first, General, I want to hear from you directly. How did this war begin? Vixer's mandibles tightened, a sign of discomfort among the Vitrarian. The question probed an old wound. The Joxar have been part of Vitrarian culture for millennia, he began. These creatures produce an enzyme during metamorphosis that enhances physical capabilities. Our ancestors discovered its effects and developed careful harvesting techniques that preserve the Joxar population. You exported this compound? Bernard prompted. Yes. For centuries, we traded it across known space. It became our primary export, a cornerstone of our economy. Vixer paused. The Growmark were among our best customers. And what happened? Vixer's shoulders slumped slightly. The compound has addictive properties when used extensively. The Growmark began developing tolerance, requiring larger doses. Their society became dependent. Eventually, they demanded exclusive rights to the Joxar breeding grounds, which you refused. We couldn't grant exclusivity without destroying our own economy. We offered increased quotas, preferential pricing. But the Growmark had become irrational. Their leadership had used the compound for too long. Their aggression, naturally high in their species, was amplified beyond reason. Bernard's eyes narrowed slightly. So they attacked. Without warning. They bypassed our orbital defenses using technology we didn't know they possessed. Their first strike wiped out our capital city and 3 million civilians. Vixer's voice remained steady, but old grief edged his words. We've been fighting ever since, retreating, regrouping, watching our world burn piece by piece. And the Galactic Council? Vixer couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. They debated. They sent observers. They expressed concern. For 10 years, they discussed possible sanctions while we've died by the millions. I understand your frustration with the Council, Bernard said. It's why humanity has maintained independence. We prefer direct action when necessary. Zoxer, who had been standing silently nearby, suddenly spoke up. If you believe in direct action, Ambassador, why have humans ignored this war for a decade? Why respond only now? Sovar shot the young officer a warning glance, but Bernard seemed unperturbed by the challenge. A fair question, the human acknowledged. Until recently, we considered this a regional conflict with limited implications for Earth. However, our intelligence suggests the Gromark are developing interstellar capabilities that far exceed previous estimates. Their aggression, fueled by this compound, presents a potential threat to multiple systems, including, eventually, our own. So you help us only to protect yourselves? Zoxer said, a note of accusation in his voice. Officer, Vixer reprimanded sharply. Bernard raised a hand. No, General, let him speak. Transparency works both ways. He addressed Zoxer directly. Self-interest is a factor in any political decision, but it's not our only motivation. Humanity has its own history of conflicts, wars that could have been prevented if outside powers had intervened earlier. What exactly are you offering? Vixer asked. That depends on what you're asking for, General. Vixer straightened, his full height impressive even through the view screen. We asked for what the Council refused to provide, direct military intervention against Gromark forces. We cannot win this war alone. Our resources are depleted, our forces decimated. Without help, Admitis will fall within months. Bernard was silent for a moment. Military intervention is a significant commitment. Our leadership will need to review the data you're providing and assess the strategic situation. While you assess, we die, Zoxer muttered. Understand time is critical, Bernard said. We will expedite our decision-making process. In the meantime, can you hold your current positions? Vixer exchanged glances with Sovar, who gave a slight headshake. With difficulty, Vixer answered honestly. The Gromark are pressing their advantage. They know we're weakening. Then reinforce where you can, Bernard instructed. Protect your civilian populations. We will contact you again within 24 hours. After the transmission ended, the command staff erupted in debate. Can we trust them? Zoxer demanded. We have no choice, Sovar replied grimly. They'll use this situation to their advantage, another officer argued. Humans have always looked after their own interests first. Enough, Vixer interrupted. Whether their motives are altruistic or self-serving doesn't matter. If they help us defeat the Gromark, I'll welcome them as saviors. As the others dispersed to their duties, Sovar remained behind. The civilians are growing restless, he reported quietly. Rumors about human involvement are spreading. What's the general sentiment? Mixed. Some see it as our salvation. Others fear we're trading one master for another. Sovar hesitated. There's also concern about what humans might demand in exchange for their help. Vixer sighed heavily. Tell them I'm negotiating from a position of strength. With respect, sir, that would be a lie. Then tell them whatever will keep them calm for another day. Vixer snapped, uncharacteristic anger flaring. If the humans decide not to help us, none of this will matter anyway. Sovar nodded and withdrew, leaving Vixer alone with his thoughts. The general moved to a small viewport that showed nothing but the rock face outside the bunker, a literal wall at their backs. How had it come to this? The proud Vitrarian civilization reduced to hiding in holes, begging for intervention from a species that had, until now, shown little interest in galactic affairs. He remembered Admitis in its glory days, the soaring crystal spires of the capital, The vast nature preserves where Joxar thrived in their natural habitat, the universities and art centers that had drawn scholars from across the galaxy, all sacrificed to Gromark greed and Vitrarian complacency. They had grown wealthy on Joxar trade without considering the consequences. Now, they paid the price. A distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. The Gromark bombardment was getting closer. The following day brought renewed attacks. The Gromark, as if sensing something had changed, intensified their assault on remaining Vitrarian strongholds. 3 outlying bunker complexes went silent. Refugee convoys were intercepted and destroyed. Supply caches were discovered and raided. Vixar coordinated defense efforts from a mobile command unit, constantly on the move to avoid detection. Communications with scattered Vitrarian forces grew increasingly difficult as Gromark jamming technology disrupted their network. "They're targeting our communication infrastructure," Sovar observed grimly. "They know we're talking to someone." 20 hours after their initial contact, with no word from Earth, morale began to crumble. Whispers spread through the ranks. The humans had abandoned them. It had all been a cruel deception. Perhaps the Gromark had somehow intercepted their transmission and were now punishing them for seeking outside help. Vixar maintained a stoic facade, but doubts gnawed at him. Had he placed too much hope in humanity's intervention? Had they simply been gathering intelligence before deciding the Vitrarian were not worth saving? "Sir," Zoxer approached, his earlier challenging tone replaced by exhaustion. "Eastern Command reports they can't hold beyond 6 more hours. The Gromark have deployed sonic disruptors. Our shields are failing. Redirect the reserve power cells," Vixar ordered. "The reserves were depleted yesterday, sir. We're operating on emergency protocols." Before Vixar could respond, an alarm sounded. A Gromark strike force had been detected approaching their current position. "Evacuation Protocol Sigma," Vixar commanded. "Move out in 5 minutes." As the command staff rushed to comply, the communications officer called out, "General, incoming transmission from Earth." Vixar hurried to the console. Ambassador Bernard's face appeared, his expression grave. "General Vixar, I apologize for the delay. Our leadership required time to review your data and reach consensus." And Vixar couldn't keep the desperation from his voice. "We've made our decision. The human coalition will intervene in the Gromark Vitrarian conflict." Relief flooded through Vixar, nearly buckling his knees. Around him, staff members who had overheard exchanged hopeful glances. "Thank you, Ambassador," Vixar said. "When can we expect support?" "We're under heavy assault across all sectors. Our fleet is already mobilizing," Bernard replied. "However, I must be clear about the nature of our intervention. This will not be a prolonged engagement. We intend to neutralize Gromark military capabilities decisively and immediately." Vixar frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," Bernard said simply. "We need you to do 2 things. First, transmit the exact coordinates of all known Gromark force concentrations and command centers. Second, ensure your own forces take cover and stay there." "You want us to retreat completely?" Vixar asked, confused. "For your own safety, yes." Bernard's expression softened slightly. "General, humanity has avoided entanglement in galactic affairs partly because we've taken different technological paths than council races. What's about to happen will be unprecedented in your experience." Before Vixar could question further, alarms blared again. "Gromark forces have breached the perimeter," an officer reported. 5 minutes to contact." "We have to move now," Sovar urged. Bernard nodded. "Go to safety, General. Transmit those coordinates when you can. We'll handle the rest." The transmission cut off as the command center erupted into frantic activity. Vixar barked orders, organizing a fighting retreat to their next fallback position, a mining facility buried deep underground. During the chaotic evacuation, with Gromark energy weapons strafing the landscape around them, Vixar wondered what Bernard had meant. What kind of intervention could possibly turn the tide of a war they'd been losing for a decade? And how could humans, who had remained isolated in their own system for generations, possess military capabilities that could challenge the Gromark war machine? They reached the mining facility 3 hours later, having lost 2 transport vehicles and 17 personnel to Gromark attacks. Once the surviving command staff had established basic operations, Vixer transmitted the requested coordinates. Every Gromark stronghold, fleet position, and command center they had identified over years of desperate intelligence gathering. Now what? Zoxer asked, the young officer's skepticism returning. We wait for these humans to work miracles. Vixer had no answer. They monitored communication channels, organized their dwindling supplies, and prepared defensive positions in case the Gromark discovered their location. 6 hours passed with no word from Earth. Then, a sensor operator called out in surprise. Sir, multiple objects entering atmosphere. Configuration unknown. Vixer rushed to the monitoring station. The display showed dozens, no, hundreds of small objects descending rapidly through Admetus's upper atmosphere. Gromar dropped ships? He asked urgently. Negative, the operator replied, confusion evident. Mass and velocity inconsistent with known Gromark vessels. I don't know what these are. Sovar studied the readings. They're too small for troop transports. Could be drones or missiles. Origin, Vixer demanded. The operator looked up, eyes wide. Based on trajectory, they came from outside the system. They just appeared. Before anyone could process this information, reports began flooding in from observation posts across the planet. Strange metal objects raining from the sky, heading directly toward Gromar positions. No human ships visible in orbit. No warning. No declaration. And then the world shook. The first explosions were distant, dull thuds that vibrated through the ground. But they quickly intensified, a rolling wave of destruction that even their underground facility couldn't fully muffle. Status displays flickered as power fluctuated. Dust sifted from the ceiling. What's happening? Zoxer shouted over the rumble. Reports came in fragmented, disbelieving. Direct hits on Gromark command centers. Their orbital platform just disintegrated. Never seen weapons like this. A screen showed a distant view captured by a surveillance drone. A Gromark battlecruiser, one of the massive ships that had terrorized Vetrarian forces for years, splitting in half as if cut by an invisible blade. The pieces tumbled from the sky in slow motion, secondary explosions blossoming across the wreckage. It's the humans, Vixer whispered, understanding dawning. This is their intervention. The ferocity and precision of the attack was breathtaking. Decades of conflict compressed into hours. Gromar positions that had withstood years of Vetrarian assaults were simply erased. Their communication networks went silent. Their air support vanished from sensor readings. Their ground forces, suddenly cut off and uncoordinated, stopped advancing. 3 hours after the first impacts, a transmission came through from Ambassador Bernard. General Vixer, he greeted, appearing calm despite the unprecedented military action he had just orchestrated. I trust you're monitoring the situation? Vixer could barely find words. What? What have you done? Exactly what we promised. Direct intervention against Gromark military capabilities. But how? We've never seen weapons with this kind of precision or power. Bernard's expression remained neutral. As I mentioned, humanity has taken different technological paths. We prioritize development in areas the council races considered impractical or excessive. You've destroyed their entire command structure, Sovar said, joining the conversation. Their fleet is in ruins. Yes, Bernard acknowledged. The remaining Gromark forces are now isolated and disorganized. They should no longer pose a significant threat to your people. Vixer struggled to comprehend the scale of what had just occurred. In 3 hours, you've accomplished what we couldn't in 10 years. Different tools for different problems, Bernard said simply. The Gromark relied on overwhelming force and attrition. Against an enemy with similar technology, that's effective. Against what we deployed, less so. And now, Vixer asked, will you occupy Admetus? Claim the Joxar for Earth. For the first time, Bernard looked genuinely surprised. No, General, that was never our intention. We intervened to neutralize a threat, not to conquer territory. Then what happens next? That's largely up to you, Bernard replied. We've created an opportunity for the Vitrarian people to reclaim their world. How you rebuild, how you manage the Joxar resource, what relationship you establish with whatever remains of the Growmark. These are your decisions. Vixer exchanged a glance with Sovar. After a decade of losing ground, the sudden prospect of peace, of reconstruction, was almost as disorienting as the lightning-fast human intervention. Thank you, Vixer said finally. The Vitrarian people owe humanity a debt we cannot repay. Bernard nodded. We'll remain in system for the next 48 hours to ensure no Growmark reinforcements arrive. After that, a diplomatic delegation will make contact to discuss formal relations between our peoples. After the transmission ended, the command center was quiet. The constant background noise of war, alerts, damage reports, emergency communications had fallen silent. For the first time in 10 years, there was no immediate crisis to manage, no desperate defense to mount. Zoxer broke the silence. It's really over? Just like that. It appears so, Vixer said, still processing the abrupt shift in their reality. They didn't even land troops, someone murmured. Just missiles or drones, or whatever those things were. Smart, Sovar observed. No occupation means no resistance, no casualties, no extended commitment. Efficient, Vixer agreed. Perhaps too efficient. He turned to his staff. I want reconnaissance teams deployed immediately. Verify Growmark positions are truly neutralized. Search for surviving civilian populations. We need to understand exactly what's happened to our world. As the command center returned to purposeful activity, Vixer stepped aside with Sovar. What do you make of them? He asked quietly. The humans? Sovar considered the question. Formidable, pragmatic, and completely unpredictable by council standards. He hesitated. They could have conquered us as easily as they defeated the Growmark. Instead, they're leaving. For now, Vixer said, but they've revealed themselves as the most powerful military force in known space. Everything changes after today. True, Sovar acknowledged. But we're alive to see those changes. That's more than I expected yesterday. Vixer nodded slowly. Organize a planet-wide broadcast. The people need to know the war is over. 3 days later, Ambassador Bernard requested a face-to-face meeting. A small human shuttle landed near the provisional government headquarters the Vitrarian had established in the ruins of a secondary city. Bernard emerged with a small delegation, the first humans to set foot on Admitis. Vixer greeted them in a cleared area that had once been a public square. Around them, Vitrarian worked to clear rubble and repair essential infrastructure. The sound of reconstruction, machinery, voices, movement created a strange counterpoint to the meeting. Ambassador, Vixer said, performing the traditional Vitrarian greeting gesture. Welcome to Admitis. Bernard returned the gesture with surprising accuracy. Thank you for receiving us, General. Or should I say Governor now? Provisional Administrator, Vixer corrected. Our governmental structure is evolving. He gestured toward a nearby building where they could speak privately. Please join me. Inside, with Bernard's security detail waiting outside, the two leaders sat across from each other at a salvage table. Through a broken window, the sounds of rebuilding drifted in. Your people work quickly, Bernard observed. We've had 10 years to practice emergency repairs, Vixer replied dryly, though usually it was during active bombardment. He studied the human closely. Your intervention has given us a chance to do more than merely survive. For that, we're grateful. Bernard nodded. I brought a formal proposal from the Human Coalition. We wish to establish diplomatic relations with the Vitrarian Provisional Government and provide humanitarian assistance for your reconstruction efforts. Humanitarian assistance? Vixer repeated, surprised. Medical supplies, food, construction materials, power generation equipment, Bernard listed. No military presence, no political conditions. Just aid for your civilian population. Vixer's mandibles flexed in confusion. Why would you offer this? You've already done more than the Council ever did. Bernard seemed to choose his words carefully. Humanity has its own history of devastating conflicts, General. We understand that winning a war and rebuilding afterward are entirely different challenges. The first requires destruction. The second requires compassion. And what does Earth want in return? Vixer asked directly. Two things, Bernard replied. First, we request that the Vitrarian government carefully regulate future Joxar harvesting and distribution. The compound's addictive properties make it dangerous when misused, as the Growmark demonstrated. Vixer nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. And the second, we would like to establish a small research outpost to study Admetus's unique biological systems. Your world has evolutionary paths that differ significantly from Earth's. There may be much we can learn from each other. Scientific exchange rather than resource extraction, Vixer noted. An unusual approach by galactic standards. Bernard smiled slightly. As I've said, humanity has chosen different paths. Vixer considered the proposal. It was generous beyond expectation, especially from a species with no previous ties to the Vitrarian. Perhaps too generous. Ambassador, your intervention and this offer of aid are extraordinary. Yet I must ask, what are humanity's true intentions in galactic affairs? You've revealed capabilities that would make Earth dominant over council races. Do you intend to replace the council? Establish your own authority? Bernard's expression grew serious. Earth has no desire for galactic dominion, General. We value our independence and respect the right of other species to determine their own futures. He paused, but we also recognize that power creates responsibility. The Council's failure to prevent the Growmark aggression demonstrated a fundamental weakness in the current order. So you'll challenge the Council? Not directly, but we will no longer remain silent when intervention is necessary. Bernard leaned forward. What happened here, what the Growmark did to your people while the Council debated, will not be permitted to happen again. Not while humanity has the power to prevent it. Vixer considered these words carefully. The human was describing a fundamental shift in galactic politics. The emergence of Earth as an independent power willing to act where the Council would not. The implications were enormous. I believe I understand, Vixer said finally, and I accept your proposal for aid and diplomatic relations. The Vitrarian people would welcome scientific exchange with Earth. Bernard seemed pleased. Excellent. The first aid shipments will arrive tomorrow. As they concluded their meeting and walked back outside, Vixer noticed a commotion near the edge of the square. A group of Vitrarian civilians had gathered, watching the human delegation with a mixture of curiosity and awe. When they saw Vixer with Bernard, a spontaneous cheer erupted. Bernard looked surprised. They seem happy to see us. You ended a war that consumed a generation, Vixer explained. Many of those people have never known peace until now. A young Vitrarian child broke from the crowd and approached, holding a small object. With gentle encouragement from adults nearby, the child presented it to Bernard, a carved figure representing a stylized Vitrarian. Bernard accepted it carefully. Thank you, he said, kneeling to the child's level. What's your name? Nelver, the child replied shyly. Thank you, Nelver. I will keep this as a reminder of our new friendship. As Bernard stood, Vixer noticed Zoxer watching from nearby, his expression thoughtful. The young officer who had been so skeptical of human intentions now observed their interaction with the civilians with visible reassessment. Later, after the human delegation had departed, Zoxer approached Vixer. They're actually leaving, he said, sounding faintly bewildered. No occupation, no demands for territory. Just help. Yes, Vixer confirmed. It seems humanity is as unpredictable in peace as they are in war. Do you trust them? Zoxer asked. Vixer thought about Bernard's words, about power and responsibility, about humanity's determination to prevent future Growmarks. I believe they mean what they say, he answered carefully. Whether that will always align with our interests remains to be seen. And the Growmark? What happens to them now? This was a question Vixer had been pondering since the human intervention. The remnants of Growmark forces had retreated to isolated outposts. Some had attempted to surrender. Others had fled the system entirely. That decision will be part of our rebuilding process, Vixer said. We must balance justice with pragmatism. The Growmark caused immeasurable suffering, but eternal enmity serves no one. Zoxer looked troubled. After everything they did, you would consider peace with them? Peace doesn't mean forgetting, Vixer replied. It means choosing a future different from our past. He gestured toward the reconstruction efforts surrounding them. That choice is why we fought for 10 years. It would be a poor victory if we simply became what we struggled against. As Zoxer departed, Sovar joined Vixer, watching the human shuttle ascend into the sky. The Council has finally responded to our situation, Sovar reported with a hint of irony. They expressed grave concern about unauthorized military action in our system and offered to mediate discussions between all parties. Vixer couldn't help but laugh, a sound so foreign it startled nearby workers. 10 years too late. Tell them we appreciate their concern, but have the situation well in hand. And the humans' offer of aid? Accept it all, Vixer decided, but establish protocols. We'll rebuild with their help, but on our terms, guided by Vitrarian needs and values. Sovar nodded in agreement. A wise approach. As darkness fell, Vixer remained in the square, watching his people work by the light of temporary illumination systems. For the first time since the war began, they moved without fear of sudden attack. Children played in cleared areas. Conversations occurred without hushed tones. The weight of imminent extinction had lifted. Yet Vixer knew the path forward would not be simple. Admetus lay in ruins. Millions had died. The trauma of a decade of war would not heal quickly. And humanity's emergence as a galactic power introduced new uncertainties into an already complex political landscape. Still, as he looked up at stars visible through the damaged atmosphere, stars that no longer threatened to rain death upon his people, Vixer allowed himself to feel something he had nearly forgotten: hope. A week passed quickly. The first human aid ships arrived as promised, massive cargo vessels descending through Admetus's atmosphere with surprising grace for their size. They brought not just supplies, but also specialized equipment and technical advisors. Human experts in everything from water purification to structural engineering who worked alongside Vitrarian specialists. Vixer watched from a makeshift observation platform as one such team collaborated to restore power to what had once been Admetus's largest hospital. The humans worked efficiently, without the bureaucratic procedures that had characterized council assistants in the past. They seemed genuinely invested in results rather than process. Remarkable, said Dr. Talvar, the Vitrarian medical director who had somehow kept the facility partially operational throughout the war. At this rate, we could have full power within days instead of months. Their technology is unexpected, Vixer observed. Not more advanced than ours in all areas, but different, focused on practical application rather than theoretical elegance. Like their intervention, Talvar noted. No grand fleet battles. No prolonged campaign. Just decisive action. Vixer nodded thoughtfully. The doctor's observation aligned with his own developing understanding of humanity, a species that valued effectiveness over tradition, results over protocol. Later that afternoon, Vixer met with a delegation of Growmark representatives who had requested amnesty. They were primarily civilians and low-ranking officials who had been stationed on Admetus when a human attack decimated their military leadership. They sat nervously before him, their normally aggressive posture subdued by recent events. The provisional government has established temporary amnesty protocols, Vixer informed them, keeping his tone neutral despite the years of suffering their kind had inflicted. Those who cooperate with reconstruction efforts and provide information about remaining military installations will be permitted safe passage off-world once transport becomes available. And those who fought directly? Asked one Growmark, his voice barely audible. Vixer met his gaze steadily. Justice will be administered, but we are not Growmark. There will be trials, not executions. The relief in the room was palpable. These individuals had expected the same brutality their forces had shown the Vitrarian. That Vixer offered mercy seemed incomprehensible to them. As they were escorted out, Sovar approached with a data tablet. The first Joxar breeding facility has been secured, he reported. Preliminary assessment suggests we can restore production within 3 months. Production, Vixer repeated, the words suddenly distasteful. Perhaps we should reconsider our relationship with the Joxar entirely. Sovar looked surprised. They're our primary resource, the foundation of our economy, and the cause of a war that nearly destroyed us, Vixer countered. Ambassador Bernard wasn't wrong about the dangers of the compound. What are you suggesting? Vixer gestured toward the rebuilding activity visible through the window. We have an opportunity to redefine ourselves, to build something different from the ashes. He paused. I'm forming a research commission to explore alternative applications for Joxar enzymes. Medical treatments, perhaps, rather than military enhancements. Sovar considered this. The Council races won't like that. They've depended on our exports. The Council did nothing while we burned, Vixer said flatly. Perhaps it's time we considered new alliances. That evening, Vixer walked alone through a residential district where temporary shelters had been established. Families gathered around community kitchens. Children played improvised games amid the rubble. Somewhere, someone was playing traditional Vitrarian music, haunting tones that hadn't been heard publicly in years. A small girl approached him, offering a portion of synthesized protein from the communal meal. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, born during the war, having never known peace until now. Thank you, Vixer said, accepting the simple gift. My mother says you brought the humans to save us, the child said matter-of-factly. Vixer knelt to her level. The humans saved us, he corrected gently. I just asked for their help. The child considered this, then nodded. Will they stay to keep the monsters away? Monsters, the way Vitrarian children had come to think of the Gromark. Vixer chose his words carefully. The humans won't stay forever, but they've helped make sure the monsters can't hurt us anymore. Good, the child declared with simple conviction before running back to her family. As Vixer continued his walk, he found Zoxer organizing a group of volunteers clearing debris from what would become a new school. Administrator, Zoxer greeted him, the formal title still awkward between them after years of military hierarchy. Still general from you, Vixer insisted. How goes the work? Well, Zoxer replied, gesturing to the volunteers. These people work 12 hours today and asked to continue into the night. I had to order them to rest. Vixer nodded in understanding. They're rebuilding more than buildings. Yes, Zoxer agreed. Purpose is a powerful motivator. He hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing a different future. I'd like to propose an educational initiative, something to help the younger generation understand what happened without perpetuating hatred. An excellent idea, Vixer approved. Draft a proposal. I'll ensure it receives priority. As they parted, Vixer realized that the transformation around him wasn't just physical. The Vitrarian people themselves were changing, looking forward instead of back, finding strength in their survival rather than bitterness in their suffering. At the temporary command center, a communication awaited from Ambassador Bernard. General, the human greeted him. I trust the aid shipments are arriving as scheduled? Yes, and they're making a significant difference, Vixer confirmed. Your people work efficiently. Bernard smiled slightly. We try to. I'm contacting you because we've received a request from the Galactic Council for a meeting regarding recent events on Admetus. They seem particularly interested in discussing humanity's role. Will you attend? Vixer asked. We're considering it, Bernard replied diplomatically. I wanted to consult with you first. The Vitrarian perspective should be represented in any such discussion. Vixer appreciated the courtesy. I would be willing to address the council, though their sudden interest comes remarkably late. Indeed, Bernard agreed. There's another matter. Our intelligence suggests several Gromark battle groups are regrouping at the edge of your system. They appear to be assessing the situation rather than preparing for immediate action, but we thought you should know. Do they pose a threat? Vixer asked, tension returning to his posture. Not at present, Bernard assured him. We're maintaining a presence in the outer system. They're aware of this and seem unwilling to test our resolve further. Thank you for the information, Vixer said, and for your continued support. After the transmission ended, Vixer remained at the console, contemplating this new development. The Growmark hadn't surrendered completely. It would have been naive to expect they would. This conflict, in some form, might continue for generations. But something fundamental had changed. The Vitrarian were no longer fighting alone against an overwhelming force. They had allies, unexpected ones, and a chance to rebuild not just their world but their place in the galaxy. The war that had defined his existence for 10 years had ended in mere hours. Tomorrow would bring challenges of a different kind, rebuilding cities, restoring ecosystems, redefining their place in the galaxy. But tonight, for the first time in a decade, the Vitrarian people could sleep without fear. That, Vixer decided, was enough for now. The rest they would face together, one day at a time, in a peace they had almost stopped believing possible.